All right, welcome into Roots. Facebook was doing some weird stuff, so I had to actually go in and figure out where our page is, uh, where all of this stuff is. So, which sounds weird. Um, at any rate, today we're going to be talking a little bit about internal reflection, self-reflection, um, and I think that's kind of appropriate since my home temple is going next week. We'll be starting our what we call annual training. We used to call it winter training, and so I'll be doing a whole lot more self-reflecting as well. I'll be doing a whole lot more reflection in general. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the idea, and we will, yeah, we'll take it from there. So, all right, let's get right into it. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami, sangham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. Anatipata Brahmaniska Param Samadhyami. Arinnadana Brahmaniska Param Samadhyami. quick 5-minute meditation. For those of you who want to do either more meditation, or those of you who are meditating on your own after the live portion is finished, do feel free to meditate with us and then pause at the end, or however you see fit, to get your appropriate time of meditation in. Our 5-minute will start now. Alright, so, as I had mentioned, I should probably put the pen here, that'd be a good idea. As I mentioned right at the beginning, we're going to be doing the need for self-reflection. And this is actually under Wobiko Bodhi in his kind of editing, and he decided to put it under a thing called disputes over discipline. So this is when monks can't get along. The need to look inside is extra strong. Now, if we as human beings take this in, as in whatever our particular role is, if we take it as soldiers not being able to get along, need to do some self-reflecting, or Dharma boots in whatever context we're in, need to do some self-reflecting from time to time, that's also a thing that works just as well. So what we're going to talk about is essentially there's a dispute and one monk calls another monk out, or one person calls somebody else out over something that was done, and they need to both reflect inside and say, okay, was this the right call to make? And we can kind of extrapolate it from there. So the Buddha says, monks, if in regard to a particular disciplinary issue, the monk who has committed an offense and the monk who reproves him do not thoroughly reflect upon themselves, it can be expected that this disciplinary issue will lead to acrimony and animosity for a long time, and the monks will not dwell at ease. But if the monk who has committed an offense and the monk who reproves him thoroughly reflect upon themselves, it can be expected that this disciplinary issue will not lead to acrimony and animosity for a long time, and the monks will dwell at ease. And how does the monk who has committed an offense thoroughly reflect upon himself? Here, the monk who has committed an offense reflects thus: I have committed a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body. That monk saw me doing so. If I had not committed a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body, he would not have seen me doing so. But because I committed a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body, he saw me doing so. Super easy, right? If you did something and somebody sees you doing it, right, they see it because you did it. But if you hadn't done it, they wouldn't see it. When he saw me committing a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body, he became displeased. Being displeased, he expressed his displeasure to me. Because he expressed his displeasure to me, I became displeased. Being displeased, I informed others. Thus, in this case, I was the one who incurred a transgression, just as a traveler does when he evades the customs duty on his goods. It is in this way that the monk who has committed an offense thoroughly reflects on himself. And that's a very interesting way of figuring out how monks are supposed to interact. And how does the reproving monk thoroughly reflect upon himself? Here, the reproving monk reflects thus: this monk has committed a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body. I saw him doing so. If he had not committed a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body, I would not have seen him doing so. But because he committed a particular unwholesome deed with the body, I saw him doing so. When I saw him committing a particular unwholesome misdeed with the body, I became displeased. Being displeased, I expressed my displeasure with him, or to him. Because I expressed my displeasure to him, he became displeased. Being displeased, he informed others. Thus, in this case, I was the one who incurred a transgression, just as a traveler does when he evades the customs duty on his goods. It is in this way that a reproving monk reflects upon himself. And here we see, so he's turning it right back around. So yes, the monk who committed the, in this case, bodily misdeed. So monk committed a particular bodily misdeed. Other monks saw him do it. Other monk kind of got displeased and reproved him and said, hey, that was wrong. That made the other monk displeased. And he knew that by saying so, he had caused displeasure. Well, okay, I mean, you still have to reprove the guy who did the thing wrong, right? Right? You still have to make sure that he's maintaining his internal discipline. He's maintaining his internal composure. You still have to do that. Even if it seems like you're doing the wrong thing, you still have to go and do that. So last paragraph that the Buddha says, if monks, in regard to a particular disciplinary issue, the monk who has committed an offense and the monk who reproves him, do not each thoroughly reflect upon themselves, it can be expected that this disciplinary issue will lead to acrimony and animosity for a long time, and the monks will not dwell at ease. But if the monk who has committed an offense and the monk who reproves him each thoroughly reflect upon themselves, it can be expected that this disciplinary issue will not lead to acrimony and animosity for a long time, and the monks will dwell at ease. So, yes, you still have to, you still have to call out the one who did the misdeed. You can't just not do that. But you have to reflect on it and say, okay, well, what part of this am I responsible for? What part of this might, is there a way that maybe I could have done this better, right? And that's where the Buddha is kind of getting at, like the monk doing the reproving. If it's done in the wrong way, it's going to cause displeasure. It's going to cause animosity. It's going to cause strife within the community, because it is done in the wrong way. The method, right? The way of doing things matters. The way you do things and the intention behind it, that matters. If you're reproving him out of anger, right? If you're reproving somebody who committed a misdeed out of anger, you're just as wrong. If you're reproving a misdeed that was done not out of anger, but to say, hey, look, we noticed that was a thing, probably want to tighten up your discipline a little bit, probably want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. There are ways to do that are useful and skillful and actually lead to monks and monks in the community, but the community at large, and we can say this in kind of military terms as well. I'll give an example in one quick second. If you're going about it the right way, if you're choosing the right way to reprove these people who commit whatever misdeed it might be, it can be expected that they're going to take it better, that they're going to understand, oh, okay, yeah, I goofed. I made a mistake. Cool, let me fix it. If you go about it the wrong way, if you go about it with anger, with the wrong intent, it's not gonna do what you want it to do, which is to correct the behavior, right? To make sure that the behavior goes from being misdeeds to being good deeds, right? Being the right deeds. And we see this all the time in the military with people who choose a very angry method of reproaching or reproving or disciplining. I don't even want to call it disciplining, because discipline is always internal. You choose your own discipline. Usually I'll call this one obedience. So we often see leaders or people across the formation kind of going about it in a very angry way, right? And going at it with a lot of aggression, a lot of anger. And it doesn't fix the behavior. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make them want to do things better ways. All it does is allow you to vent your anger, and then you're just as wrong, as the Buddha is saying here. You're just as wrong as they are yeah, they did their misdeed, but you went about it correcting it with anger, with aggression, with ill intent. And in doing so, you incurred a transgression of your own. So how do we fix this, right? There are ways to go about it, and one of the ways that I think is probably the most useful that I've seen recently is what Dr. Gabor Mate calls compassionate inquiry, right? We're using it in a slightly different context. He uses it in the context of trauma. We're using it in the context of internal discipline and or obedience as needed, to kind of go about getting that behavior, correcting that behavior, right? You can help use it to address trauma, but you can also help use it to address behavior. And in this case, you can use it in a very gentle way to kind of look at the behind the scenes to say, okay, why is this person doing this thing? And how can we help them to find better ways of going about this and accomplishing what they need to accomplish? And the simple reality is, there are ways. There are. You don't have to go in guns blazing, screaming and yelling and ranting and raving and demanding that everybody that everybody just kind of shut up and do what you tell them. There are ways to do discipline, ways to encourage discipline, right? Because discipline is an internal thing. There are ways to encourage discipline that do not rely on anger, that do not require aggression, that do not require ill intent, right? And it's on us to find those, to reflect and ask, did I do this thing the right way? Yes, there was some misdeed that happened. Am I addressing it appropriately? Am I addressing it the right way? And we can look inside ourselves and say, I know that I'm just as guilty sometimes of doing some dumb stuff, right? We all are. This is this basic humanity. We all, from time to time, will fail. That's just reality. And when we do, we need to look inside ourselves and say, okay, the way that I would use to correct myself should match the way that I would use to correct others in this same case, right? If I'm going to use compassionate inquiry or some similar method to kind of go about it from a standpoint of curiosity rather than a standpoint of, going in hard and angular and aggressive and guns blazing, right? You can do that to yourself, but you're not going to get good results. You can do that to others, but you're not going to get good results. What you find is that when you go in a little bit more compassionate, when you go in a little bit more curious, to try to find, to try to ask questions and find answers, then you will get to the why the behavior is happening, and then you can actually correct the behavior, right? I have, I for a long time had up on my door a nice little quote, right? From, I think actually Warner did it the best. Beneath every behavior is a feeling. Beneath every feeling is a need. And when we address the need rather than the behavior, we get to the root of the problem rather than the symptom. We get to the cause of the problem rather than the symptom. And in a kind of a medical way, where we've talked about the Buddha being considered kind of a spiritual doctor of sorts, we don't really need to get at the symptom, we need to get at the cause. And this is what, things like compassionate inquiry allow us to do. It allows us to look underneath the behavior to find that feeling, and look beneath the feeling to find the need. What need here is not being met? What can we do to address this so that the need is being met, so that the behavior will reflect that appropriately? So the example that I want to kind of give is most military posts will shut down some part of the post during PT hours, during fitness hours, and when those are shut down, if it's done the right way, you will have people kind of like directing traffic, that any traffic that might come in, that hey, this is not a legitimate route, you have to go there, right, or whatever. Sometimes, however, you will find that, especially like the civilian spouses or the civilian personnel on post, they don't necessarily know that because they're not in the military. They don't get the obsession that we sometimes have with organized PT. And they kind of don't understand that, yeah, we need these things to kind of do what they're doing. So what we do instead of addressing it, more often than not, and I've heard multiple cases of this, where a civilian spouse will be, driving their car as they normally would, and nobody bothered to put up a road sign, nobody bothered to put up some kind of like thing blocking the road. So spouse thinks it's normal to just drive down the road as they normally would. Well, they end up getting accosted by somebody who's screaming their lungs out, trying to demand that they just stop what they're doing, and they have to get, they'll come up to the car and they'll scream at this person who's a civilian, who doesn't care. They're not in the military. And there was no signage saying, hey, this road is blocked, you can't go here. Now, instead of sitting there and being like, hey, like, you realize this road is closed, right? You gotta go a different route. which would be the appropriate way of addressing this, right? Okay, so we know that you need to get somewhere, that's the need, right? We know that you're trying to get there the best way that you can, that's the feeling, sort of, right? And so you're driving down this road, but this road is closed. You need to take a different route. You need to choose a different method to get to that place that you're trying to get to. And this is how this is a road that would work, but this other road is a road that would work, but this one does not. Instead, we, members of the military, sit there and just scream and yell and just throwing hands and all this nonsense. Which is not the right answer, and it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't solve the issue. It doesn't change the behavior. All it does is cause more acrimony, cause more, animosity from those civilians who don't deserve to be addressed like that. It's not their fault, right? It is, however, that individual service member's fault for coming at them guns blazing, for coming at them and screaming and, doing all the knife hand stuff and whatever, right? That part of it does not work. And the Buddha is right about this, right? There's a method that does work and there's a method that doesn't work. And if we choose the method that doesn't work, we are just as wrong as the person doing the misdeed, right? So the person who's driving down the road when it's supposed to be closed, but nobody bothered to put up any kind of signage, nobody bothered to put up a barrier of any kind, right? We are just as wrong as they are if we go in guns blazing, if we go in angry, if we go in aggressive, if we go in with ill intent, right? That's on us, and that's on us to fix, right? Just as it would be on that particular service member to learn how to shut their sorry mouth and find ways to address people appropriately given that situation, right? There are ways to do things, and there are ways not to do things, and the Buddha is simply saying, look inside and figure out if you've been doing things the right way or not. If you've been addressing things the right way or not. And if not, fix yourself, right? So, I think I'm going to leave it there. We'll go ahead and close up quick, and we'll get moving. Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami Panatipata Brahmaniskam Param Samadhyami Aninna Alright, Darwoods, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.